Man, my God, what a live stream update that was. It was absolutely incredible. I loved almost every minute of it. We, of course, had the reveal of ranged combat and then kind of a teaser reveal of the Ranger archetype. And aside from that, there were a lot of little details that they revealed that kind of surprised me. And we'll get to all that. But first, I do want to say, if for some reason any intrepid employee accidentally clicks on one of my videos and you end up here watching this video, I want to tell you, you guys are amazing. You guys prove every single day that our game development system is completely broken in need of major reform. The way you guys have taken the combat from the floaty kind of janky system that was in Apocalypse to the agency robbing root motion system of Alpha 1 to the ability for us to choose and hot swap basically between split body and root motion in the middle of Alpha 1 so we could try both and get feedback, and then taking all that feedback and made this system we have now that's kind of a combination of both. It's just something that's just not done in video games anymore, especially with the open development and all of those things. It's just incredible. The complete redesign of the Nakua dwarves, the kind of tweaking of the other races besides the Nakua. It's just incredible. So I just wanted to say that you guys are incredible. If you accidentally end up here before you click away, thank you guys for everything that you're doing. So let's go ahead and go start right into the video that they show with the range combat reveal and the Ranger reveal. It's crazy how much information we got from what was a relatively short video, especially if you take out all the extra crap and just focus on actually watching the combat. I'm not going to get into the reacting so much to the video and the oohs and ahs and everything that all the other creators are doing. If you want to see people react to that specific video, almost every creator that you watch has released that video probably already. So I'm going to focus on some other things, some things that Steven said, and some questions that I have. I will say before I get started on that, the airstrike ability might be the coolest ability I've ever seen in any MMO. It's definitely up there. I'd have to really think about other ones that I've seen, but that thing is so cool. And if they end up having every archetype has an ability that's at least that cool, or 2 or 3, man, this game is going to just blow everybody out of the water. It's crazy how cool that ability was. So let's talk a little bit about this tab targeting versus action combat system they got going on. That's kind of the big takeaway. Almost everybody is talking about that. I've already seen lots and lots of videos about it. And I do have a video planned where I will discuss that specific thing in detail, like the tab targeting versus the action combat, and how they fit into what Ashes is doing. But there is one thing that they're doing here that, while there are other games that have systems that are somewhat similar to what Ashes has shown. Guild Wars 2 is a good example. Elder Scrolls Online is a good example of something of a hybrid action tab. To my knowledge, there is not a game that has tab targeting with projectile-based ranged combat. And so Steven was asked specifically if it was hit scan or if it was projectile based, and he said it was projectile based. Like out and out said it. He also talked about how when you fire a shot, it goes in a straight line until it reaches its range, hits some scenery, in the environment, or hits a target. Something comes in, jumps in front of it. So that leaves me with a lot of questions. So for example, if I'm in action combat and there's a bunch of tanks in front of me and I want to hit the healer that's in the back, do I have to aim higher, like above the line of tanks, and count on arrow drop? Is there arrow drop at all? I have no idea. Can you hit the guy in the back if you're in action combat? And more specifically, if you're in tab combat, does it aim over the line for you, or does the projectile just magically teleport through the line of tanks? Like, how does it hit the thing that's behind what you're trying to hit, or does it hit what's in front of you? Because if it hits what's in front of you rather than automatically getting to what you're actually trying to target, what's in the back, I think you start leaning more towards action combat being more desirable in that situation because you'd have more control over the game. So while almost everybody is running around saying this made me think that tab is going to be the way, I'm thinking action is going to be the way, just based on what I saw, how it all looked, and just trying to calculate what you'd be doing, in real time in combat. So, it's just something to think about. I would like to get some clarification on that, and I'm probably going to ask some questions related to that, or a question for next week's live or next month's live stream, and maybe it'll get answered. So the other thing I want to talk just a little bit about before I let you guys get out of here is the Q&A, because the Q&A for me is usually pretty meh. Like sometimes I would say there's usually like one question that gets answered that I'm like, oh, hey, that's a question I actually wanted answered. But with this one, like there was several questions that I thought I would like an answer for that, and Steven gave a good answer to it. So I just want to go over those real quick, so because I know a lot of these people who are reacting to this update haven't gone over what was said during the Q&A, and there's some good ones in there. So Steven was asked about summoning, and the question was more about like with a summoner feeling like a hybrid role, would you be like a frontline tank if you decided to be a tank as a summoner? Could you fill that role really well, or will you be able to fill any of the three roles really well, basically at a given, like any given second? And his answer was pretty interesting. He talked about your secondary archetype choice will inform how good you are at the other three roles. So if you choose tank as your secondary archetype, then you will be able to be a good, reliable fill-in as a tank, as a summoner tank. And you may be able to be okay as a fill-in for a healer or a DPS, but it's going to be kind of marginal. You're going to be okay at it. And then the same thing if you choose a more DPS-oriented secondary archetype, then you'll be better at DPS and you won't be as good at filling as tank and heals. And then I would assume from there that you could further take a character in the direction that you wanted to go, like let's say more towards the DPS area with the augment choices you make and your gear choices that you make, and all those things. So it's pretty interesting the way that the summoner is looking to shape up, and I do believe that when it all is said and done, the summoner class is going to be probably somewhat difficult, one of the more higher skill level classes, but also one of the more popular. I think people are really going to like the way that system, they're just what we know so far. Steven also got asked about, the question was about whether boats or ships in naval combat, whether they would have effects on them. So for example, a DOT effect. So could you set a ship on fire and then it have a DOT effect on it? And the answer was basically yes. But in there, he kind of dropped a little thing about the weathering patterns can change from moment to moment, and he didn't say what would cause that change. Like, will there be players who are capable of casting spells or something that can change the weather, or is it just that the weather in Vera, it can changes from moment to moment? But he made it sound like, I know in combat, I forget what it's called, the weather vane, I think. I can't remember what it's called, but when one side has it, it means you have the wind advantage, and then you could basically use your maneuvering to basically keep the weather advantage. And so you will always have the maneuvering advantage in real naval combat. I wish I could remember the name of that, what they called that. But anyway, it sounds like you're not going to be able to have that. Like weather's going to change fast enough that nobody's just going to have the weather advantage, the wind at their sails all the time, so to speak. So that was a very interesting answer that he kind of just slipped in there and we got no details for. So a little after that, Steven was asked about caravans. And the question, which I think was a really good question, was why would I destroy a caravan rather than steal it? Because once I steal it, then I can run off with it and go take the goods and go do whatever I want to with it. And that's a good question, as it really is. And Steven's answer was more or less a game type of answer. Like they are specifically trying to make it where you have to destroy the caravan to then put you in a logistical bind. How are you going to get all of that stuff that was in the caravan to whatever spot that you want it for safety for you? So it definitely puts you in a different situation. You also have the splitting up of the loot amongst everybody who helped destroy the caravan and all that. So it was a very interesting question. I thought it was a very interesting answer that they have gone away from what might be more realistic, or I would say would be more realistic, because you would be trying to steal the caravan. That's what they did with like stagecoaches and stuff like that back in the day, even trains. Whereas now you're actually going to destroy the item that, or the vehicle that is carrying all the items, and now you have to figure out what to do with the items right there in the middle of nowhere, basically. So it's going to make some interesting gameplay, I think. One of the other really big ship-related things that came out about this was that the ships are not going to have internal compartments, so you're not going to be able to go like below the deck, or potentially even in like a captain's quarters, which would be on deck. And he basically just said it's for technological reasons. Basically, he didn't really go into it, but there's not going to be internal compartments on ships. You're not going to be able to go below deck, so it's all going to be done on the deck. Another thing that he did this several times in this one, where he dropped a piece of information and it either was like complete out of nowhere, I was kind of blindsided by it, or it just led me to more questions that I want answered. And one of the things that he said was that we would have saved respecs. So for example, you're in town, you have your weapon skill tree set up in a certain way, your abilities and augments chosen out in a separate way, your passives all set out in a way that you want, and you decide you want to go out in a different way. And in town, it sounds like you're going to be able to just respec, just go to 0 on all of those, and then choose all those skills again. And then more specifically, you're going to be able to save that individual specs. So then next time you could just click a button in town, very clearly in town, not in the wild. In town, you can click a button and just swap between saved specs. He didn't say how many specs you could swap between. I don't know. That's further questions. But the big question that left for me was that I don't want people to confuse swapping specs with swapping your secondary archetype, which swaps your class. So if you're a tank primary and you have a summoner secondary and you decide you want to switch to a cleric secondary, you can do that. There's a quest that's associated with it, and it looks like it's going to take a lot of time, and it's not going to be something that's so easy to do that it's going to be something that people do all the time. But you will be able to do it. So my question is, when you swap secondary archetypes, and then let's say later on I decide to swap back, will my old saved specs still be associated with my old saved secondary archetype? It's a question. Who knows what the answer is? But it's a question that really came up whenever he started talking about this. I sat there for several minutes trying to figure out how that would work. Another thing that was brought up, somebody asked if the island nodes would be available right from the start of the game. And if you don't really give it any real thought at all, your immediate thought is, well, no, nobody's going to have. There's no fast travel. Nobody's going to have flying mounts at launch. Nobody's going to have boats at launch. So how are you going to get to those nodes? Stephen did mention you can swim there. Now, I would assume that there would be that adventure would be fraught with danger, but you could swim there. And he did talk about how if it is your group's desire to go to a far off node, maybe an island node, and level it up, you would have to be very well organized to get there and start leveling up that node and actually outpace the leveling of the nodes that are closer to the starter zone. So if you guys need practice on your organization, it's time to start practicing, I think. The last thing that he brought up that kind of made me do the head tilt, like, what? They have an idea for disguises, so I guess it would be something you could put in your cosmetic slot, or maybe even in your armor slot. I'm not really sure. But they would incorporate hiding your nameplate or guild tag. So you start talking about all of the, let's say, all of the intrigue that people are already discussing is going to happen with this game, with all the, because it's such a PvP oriented game, and how important raising and lowering nodes is going to be, and the leadership of the nodes and the castles and mega guilds and all of those things. It's going to be very EVE Online-ish in terms of that. And now you're talking about you may be able to hide your nameplate or guild tag. That's very, very interesting, extremely interesting. And Stephen also mentioned being able to do something similar to that with caravans and boats. So I can't wait for that system, to hear more about it. I want to know everything about that system, because I think it's going to add a very large amount to the intrigue of the game. That's really all I have for you guys on this video. It was an awesome update. I think it's the most important one of 2022. I think we learned a lot about Ashes of Creation and Intrepid Studios from this one update. So I'm really excited about the future of the game, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.